Greetings, ladies and gents, and welcome to this latest edition of Tales from Outer Space. And as always, I hope that you enjoy Drone Swarm, written by HamsterIV. 200 standard cycles ago, we sent a scientific probe to a planet with a thriving ecosystem. We had probed this planet several times over the preceding millennia, observing the native flora and fauna, looking for signs of advanced civilization. Potential brothers for our galactic community. Inevitably, these probes would be destroyed by weather, or by the creatures that they were sent to observe. Yet, the probe in question met its end far sooner than expected. Upon orbital approach, the probe reported great swaths of land were artificially illuminated on the night side of the planet, a sure sign that the native species were able to store chemical or electrical energy and release it as light. Artificial light alone was not proof of advanced civilizations, but it was a strong indicator. The techs manning the probe passed the information on to the superiors who would gather the linguistics, diplomats, and philosophers for a potential first contact encounter. The gathering of the first contact experts was ultimately unnecessary. As the probe deaccelerated in the planet's atmosphere, it was bombarded with radiation and repeatedly buzzed by fast-moving atmospheric vehicles. The technicians tried to capture as much data from the probe as possible, but the sensors were overwhelmed by the radiation, and the close proximity of other atmospheric craft introduced fatal variables into the probe's automated landing procedure. Instead of landing gently, the probe came crashing down in the middle of a major population center. The last images the probe sent back to its operators were the tall bipedal creatures climbing over its ruined hull, pulling apart the wreckage and examining the various components inside. The atmosphere in the command center was one of confusion and shock. The last probe, dispatched just 5,000 standard cycles ago, had reported no signs of advanced energy manipulation, much less high-altitude flight. The tall bipedal creature matched a species barely out of the Stone Age. These creatures self-identified as human and had advanced more in 5,000 cycles than most species did in a million. A new set of probes was quickly dispatched to make formal contact with the new species. But it would be 50 cycles before they would arrive at the humans' homeworld. The lost probe contained no FTL or power plant, so it was reasoned that the humans would gain little from exploiting its wreckage. Oh, how wrong we were. When our follow-up probes established orbit over humans' homeworld, we found that there had been a great deal of change. Several of the population centers that once illuminated the night sky were dark. Buildings had collapsed and streets were filled with rubble. We watched from orbit as tiny objects zipped through the wreckage. They exchanged energy pulses, lashing each other with bladed implements, and exploded in cascades of broken masonry. The humans apparently found this wanton destruction a source of great amusement. They still were using the electromagnetic spectrum for mass communication broadcasts, and our probes tapped into the data streams. They showed a ground-level view of the carnage and destruction. They showed teams of humans in a room illuminated by the glow of multiple video displays, weeping or making violent declarations of joy when something big exploded. This wasn't just an isolated broadcast. Thousands of audio-video feeds from around the planet showed the humans making war, celebrating war, and dissecting war. Never had the sociologists encountered a species so enamored by violent conflict. It would take years to analyze the data our probes were gathering, but before the full planetary cycle passed, it became apparent that the humans were aware of our probe's orbital presence and were taking steps to capture one. In a panic, the mission commander activated emergency recall procedures, and the probes quickly extracted by FTL-capable craft. Teams of analysts went to work on the data that the probes had collected. They concluded that the humans were in the 5th age of technological progression when we lost our first probe. They had the resources to feed and shelter their population several times over, yet still engaged in physical conflict as if there was still resource scarcity. At that time, human conflict involved a human establishing a line of sight with an opponent and exchanging chemical-propelled bits of metal. The process was extremely hazardous to all parties involved. In fact, conflict and the percentage of the population trained for conflict had been on a downward trend for the past 100 cycles. A few of the more advanced human factions tried to maintain their power and prestige through remote weapons known as drones. The pre-contact drones were limited by onboard energy capacity, the quality of data that could be sent long-range through the electromagnetic spectrum, and the danger of hostile electromagnetic interference. Unfortunately, our lost probe contained an FTL point-to-point communication system that in one step solved all the limitations of humanity's pre-contact drones. At a time in the societal development where conflict was supposed to be subsiding, we had handed the humans a key to the consequence-free violence. It hadn't even taken the humans a whole generation to adapt. Great swaths of their population had enlisted in their military the day the physical exertion and danger ceased being a part of a warrior's life. Their leaders encouraged us, making celebrities out of the most ruthlessly efficient pilots and broadcasting their accomplishments to people hungry for conflict but averse to risk. In the vast sea of time, we have never witnessed a sentient species behave with such a wanton aggression. It was worse than the animalistic struggle for food and resources. These humans would battle for pride, for pleasure, and even for sport. The Great Council debated for the next 7 cycles. Experts from all fields gave testimony on their analysis of humans. It was determined that we could not peacefully coexist in the same galaxy as such an aggressive species. The decision was made to assemble an extermination fleet. Twice before, the Council had authorized such drastic action. Twice before, had a warship from every council race been gathered together to crush a potentially dangerous civilization in its cradle. It was important to the Council that no member hands be unbloodied from the act of genocide. No one would be allowed to take a moral high ground on such an abominable action. It would take time for the extermination fleet to be assembled, and the Council's peacekeeping fleet would be employed to quarantine the humans in the home star system. The sudden appearance and disappearance of our second wave of probes must have alerted the humans to the possibilities of FTL travel. They set about testing the limits of the Council's quarantine. Ship after ship randomly jumped into vast emptiness of interstellar space. Our sensors and weapons were far more advanced than the early human vessels. We destroyed each human-built contraption as fast as we could to prevent humans from mastering the art of FTL travel. Any sane race would have abandoned the FTL program after losing so many prototypes. Unfortunately, sanity was in short supply amongst the human population. They continued to probe our quarantine, reaching further, reacting faster, and eventually engaging the ships sent to enforce the quarantine. 80 standard cycles later, after initiating the quarantine, the Council lost contact with the peacekeeping ship Verdant Skies. It had been dispatched to destroy a human ship breaking quarantine, the 5th in its 20-cycle tour of duty. It initially looked like a textbook interception, the Verdant Skies rail cannon shattering the hull of a fragile human vessel in extreme range. As the Verdant Skies moved closer to inspect the wreckage, several pieces of randomly drifting debris suddenly altered course and plowed into the hull of the Verdant Skies. Internal log records a dreadful buzzing noise as tiny craft propelled by human micromotors swarmed through the ship. The crew fought with a great bravery, but were cut down one by one. Their weapons and reflexes unable to counter the skill of the human drone operators. Within minutes, the only peacekeeper alive with a small maintenance team clustered inside a coffin-like crawl space leading to the main reactor. Those brave survivors activated the self-destruct, preventing the ship from falling into human hands. Our fleet commanders were in shock. Never had they lost a ship to such precise and ruthless boarding action. New rules of engagement were drafted. Peacekeeper interception missions had to be dispatched in pairs and follow strict operating procedures to avoid similar traps. The precautions hindered the peacekeepers' effectiveness, and the human ships pushed farther out than the quarantine zone. The civilizations closest to the quarantine zone demanded that the extermination fleet be launched early. But the Council was adamant that the last ships from the member race on the far side of the galaxy be allowed to join before the ship could embark on its mission. The humans, on the other hand, did not stand up for humanity. One day a human ship appeared in orbit over Sirius Prime, one of the 5 staging areas for the extermination fleet. The ships in orbit were quick to dispatch it, but were unable to disable all the drone pods before they hit the atmosphere. The human drone operators weren't crafty. Instead of embarking on a killing spree the moment they made contact with our forces, they dispersed into the uninhabitable regions of the planet. Some were destroyed by planet-side forces, but many managed to disappear into the wilderness. The following month saw more human ships arrive above Sirius Prime. They jumped in with a frightening accuracy, sometimes less than a kilometer from a ship that they were targeting. Time after time, the drone swarms would be burning through the hull of their victim by the time the rest of the fleet could respond. It became too dangerous to keep irregular orbital patterns around Sirius Prime. Ships had to make random course alterations and leave gaps in the orbital coverage. Into these gaps, the humans began jumping atmosphere-capable drone pods. Planet-side drone swarms wreaked havoc on defensive forces. We tried to copy the humans' designs and tactics, but with several generations head start and a mental propensity towards sudden and decisive violence, there was nothing that we could do to keep up. Reinforcements from other extermination fleet staging areas were brought in, but it was too little, too late. In less than 2 standard cycles, Sirius Prime had to be abandoned. This time, there was no question if the humans had managed to secure our technology. 100 ships of the extermination fleet lay broken in orbit. Orbital scans indicated the fleet's planet-side support teams were captured and herded into dead cities. The Council was forced to abandon over 1 million fleet support personnel when Sirius Prime fell. If less than 1% could be convinced to share their technical expertise, our quarantine would have been for nothing. Now we face hostile empire within our galaxy, one who has completely rewritten the rules of infantry combat after acquiring a single science probe's communication unit. I fear what they will do with the plunder of Sirius Prime. I fear the humans. Councilman Blacked for a brief history of the human crisis. End of story. This is a special thank you to the one, the only, the legendary Eric Hino, who has become the only Tier 6 patron. I just want to thank the T5 patrons and channel members: Bob the Dragon, Cam Maxwell, Casper Arnold, Estrella the Dreamer, Tryagain95, Purigiol, Meridian117, Alithia, Jordan Bucksbaum, Angry Marine, Albarden Gusta, and Barkey. Thank you very much. And that, my friends, concludes this video. I hope that you enjoyed. There are links down below, both to support this channel and for the author of this fiction. Anyways, I hope you all have a fantastic one, and I'll see you next time. Cheers.